guys, it is Aoife from Words of Clover, and I'm here to talk about some of the tops and bottoms and some of the middling books that I read from April, May and June, because obviously I just didn't do any wrap-ups that time because I wasn't really making any videos. So I didn't want to talk about every single book that I'd read during those months because that's just a lot, and I don't really want to do that. And I do feel like some of them were middling, 3 stars, fine, but not anything great. And yeah, I just don't think I need to waste time talking about some of those books. Everything I have read is also documented on my Storygraph and my Goodreads, also on my Instagram stories, which I all saved to highlight. So if anyone hasn't seen the books that I've read from April, May and June and do want to know my more in-depth thoughts on them, you can go to any of those places and you can see. But I want to talk about some of the books that I feel like I will talk about, that I have maybe a little bit more to say than just oh yeah, it was good, or oh yeah, it was bad. So I have 9 books to talk about. So it could be three books almost from each month that I want to talk about. And the first one I want to talk about is one that I actually read in very early April. And I've been trying to read I say a translated fiction every month. It hasn't really, I'm a little bit behind that, but I basically want to read 12 translated fiction books this year, which kind of obviously averages out to one a month, but there are some months I read more than one, etc. Some months I miss it, but I am just slightly behind target, but I'm hoping to catch up in the next couple of months for that. But for this, I was like, okay, this is a great opportunity to read a book that I have been hearing about for quite a long time, very, very intrigued about, and that is Tender is the Flesh. And this is a book that is translated from Spanish, I think. It is a book that is translated from Spanish, I think, and we are following a man who works in this kind of meat processing factory, but this is taking time in kind of a not very far away future, where basically there was some sort of disease that a lot of animals got, and basically meant that the food was no longer good for consumption. So cows, pigs, etc., none of them could be eaten anymore, and animals in general aren't kept anymore. People don't keep animals anymore because they're afraid there's a disease that they could get from these animals. Even birds and stuff, people go around with umbrellas, so birds they can't be touched, or birds can't go near them because they're afraid that the birds will carry this disease that will be given to them. So because of this, obviously people aren't eating meat anymore, and instead of becoming vegan or vegetarian, they've decided to figure out a way to make a section of humans kind of subhuman, or not really human anymore, basically. And these people are now being bred for meat in the same way that cows and pigs, etc., are bred for meat. I can't remember the name that is given to the humans who are designated as meats. It's they're just basically it's almost as if they're just a part, and people just don't see them as human anymore. But what's really this is just a really horrifying novel in so many ways, because as I said, it's a very near future. It's not particularly that dystopian, because our main character, whose name is Marcus, he grew up in a time exactly like us, where people were eating animals, everything was normal. And then within the space of his lifetime, he's only in his probably his 40s maybe, potentially a bit younger. So in the space of only not a long period of time, people have suddenly completely changed their way of thinking when it comes to meat, and when it comes to humans, when it comes to who deserves a life and who doesn't, in terms of humanity. And it is just really fascinating, and also very, very gross to read. There are some really graphic descriptions of slaughtering process, meat, eating meat, etc. And it is it's really, really disturbing to read. And one of the things I found most disturbing is obviously this is very disturbing, but then for people who the same thing, basically everything that happens in this book does actually happen in real life, except obviously not for humans, but it happens to cows, it happens to pigs, it happens to chickens, it happens to other animals that are horses. It's happening to animals that are being processed for meat. Pigs are being kept in these cages and have piglets, and they're being taken away. And there was basically just so many. I was you could just replace the word human for pig or cow, and that would be happening today. And it was just it was just so horrifying to read, to be honest. And yeah, I found it really intriguing, kind of couldn't look away from it, but at the same time felt vaguely sick the entire time I was reading it. It wasn't a 5 star for me, it was kind of a 3.5 star. I really did think that I would really love this, but I think I just couldn't, there was just that, it was just that horrifying element that just was yeah, I did struggle with it a little bit because of that, even though I actually wasn't expecting to, because normally there are things like that I'm fine with, but this one, yeah, there was just like that element of it that I was like, oh, like it's just so. A book that I actually was really surprised at, I didn't expect to enjoy so much. It's one I listened to an audiobook, and it is The Siren of Sussex by Mimi Matthews. And this is like the first book in this kind of like Victorian era. I don't know whether it's Regency, if it's Victorian era, but kind of series that she has. I think it's called the Bells of London. And we are following a character called Evelyn Maltravers, and she is in her 20s. She's come to London to enter high society to obviously look for a husband. She is one of these like kind of like characters we read about whose family isn't that well off, and she needs basically a rich husband. She needs like a husband, a rich husband, to like, you know, kind of help her family, help herself out. And she doesn't really have a lot going for her. She knows she's not like the prettiest person in the room. She's a little bit of a blue stocking, as they called them back in the day. But one thing that she's really, really good at is horse riding, and she loves horse riding. And she knows that when she's on a horse, that no one can take their eyes off her. So she's like, this is going to be my like how I attract my husband will be on horseback. And she goes and she knows that she has to basically look the part. So she goes to this tailor to try and get like obviously all these new like riding habits fit, and this is where we meet our love interest. And he is a half Indian, half British man called Ahmad, and obviously he is a person of like he's a businessman. He is working with his hands. He is not a gentleman. He's not someone who like grew up in a estate or like is inheriting fortunes. So when the two of them start like falling for each other, it's obviously like bad for both, for like a lot of reasons, in terms of like, you know, and one of the reasons being is that he is a man of color in a society that where is quite racist and will be looking down upon. It's like, how will that work? And yeah, there's like a lot of things that are like working against them, but this book just really charmed me, and I just really, really enjoyed the kind of the slow burn of the romance, the intensity when the two of them connected, and the friendship that built up between them. The side characters I really, really enjoyed as well, who I'm hoping will follow in the rest of the series. But yeah, this was just a really, really good book. I thought it was just really well written, really engaging, and yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. And I just really loved seeing maybe like different parts of Victorian society as well that we might not have looked at before, even when it comes to like the horse riding side as well. Like you wouldn't really think of the women going out on horseback and that being this like attractive endeavor for them. Like sometimes you think of them being a little bit more cloistered, but this idea of the girls going out in the morning and being able to gallop their horses and have freedom in that way was really lovely as well. And there's also an element of like spiritualism as well, and that like spiritualist kind of community that were like was growing quite strong at that time as well, and how Evelyn ends up falling into it because of her uncle. And that was really interesting. I really liked that part of it as well. So yeah, I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars, and I have the next book in the series on reserve from the library, so hopefully I'll get that soon. I'll be able to read it. The next book I read was The Queen of Dirt Island by Donal Ryan. Donal Ryan is an author I really, really enjoy, and his books are normally like 5 out of 5 stars for me, and this one was actually no different. And this one was pretty much no different. It was like a 4.5 out of 5 stars. This one we're following a few generations of women from the same family. So we are following the story from the granddaughter's voice. Her name is Saoirse, and we are following her mother Aileen and her granny Mary. And when Saoirse was born, her father, she was only like I think either a couple of days old or a few hours old, and her father actually died. So she grew up never knowing her father, and her mother and her grandmother basically lived together and brought her up. And we see how all of this, just the relationship between them, their relationship with the town and with other people, with other neighbours, and it's basically just these like women working together to just keep going basically, and to live this life, and to try and sometimes deal with gossipy neighbours and old-fashioned ideas about what people should and shouldn't do. And in the form of Donal Ryan, like his stories are very quiet, they're quite character focused. They have this like lovely, like gentle, beautiful quality to them, and this this is exactly what that is. His other book that I read a few years ago, Strange Flowers, is actually set in the same town as this one. So if you've read Strange Town, I would say read Strange Flowers first, because in the timeline this kind of follows after that. But the characters actually do come into play in this one as well, and we see their lives intertwine a good bit. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed that element of it as well. It was just kind of like little Easter eggs, having read and loved Strange Flowers so much, to have them appear in this book and see how the characters are doing and what they were doing next was really lovely, and I enjoyed it a lot. So yeah, this one was really, really good, and it was definitely definitely one I'd read again, maybe via audiobook. I think I'd really like it. So yeah, I enjoyed it. The next book is one that I really didn't enjoy for a lot of reasons, and that is The Idea of You. This I actually read really quickly after watching the movie, because I actually really enjoyed the movie, which has Anne Hathaway in it, and that guy whose name I cannot remember. But yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. I thought Anne Hathaway was so beautiful in it. I really thought the relationship, the age gap relationship in this was really interesting. And obviously it is such an obvious kind of like Harry Styles One Direction fan fiction, that I was like, okay, I'm really interested in the source material of this movie, and I wanted to read the book and see what the story was for it. And I actually had the book already for ages on my Kindle, and I'd bought it like last year, a couple of years ago, but I had it on my Kindle already, so I was like, grand, I'll read it now, because my interest is piqued. And I kind of wish I hadn't. I think the movie is a lot better than the book, to be honest. They made certain changes to the movie, which I think, number one, make me feel better about the romance, and number two, the movie ending is so much better than the book. The book ends in such a depressing way. I really did not like it. But we are following a character who is in her 40s. She is divorced, and she is like trying to like co-parent her daughter now with her husband. Her daughter in the book is only like maybe 8 or 9, like she's a child, where her daughter in the movie is like 17 or something, but her daughter is like young in the book, and her daughter is obsessed with this band who's very pretty much like One Direction, and she brings her daughter to this like it's kind of like a special concert event thing, and she ends up meeting one of the boys called Hayes in this band, a British boy called Hayes who has an attraction to older women. Who could that be inspired by? I don't know. Completely random. So she meets Hayes. He's obviously really attracted to her. They kind of hit it off, and they kind of start this thing. And that's fine. I really like the idea of like, a woman going out there and doing her thing, getting her, what she needs from a hot boy band member. Absolutely go for it. But I did have a really big issue with the fact that she was in her 40s. She's either 39, yeah, she's 39, like she's basically just turned 40, and he is 20, like he's not even 21, so like this is set in the States, so like they're going out and he can't even drink yet at the table, like he can't even have a glass of wine at dinner. So she's 20 years older than him, and I just thought that was so young. I was like it's just, I don't know, I just felt it really icky, and I would like to say I would also feel the same if it was like a 20-year-old girl and a 40-year-old man. I think I would also feel the same. But yeah, in the movie he's a little bit older. I think he's 24, and I felt better about that, because I was like, okay, like he's a little bit more mature. I just think 20 is so young. Like you're literally just 1 year off from being a teenager. Like you're so young. When I think about how young I was at 20, I'm like, it's so young to be in a relationship with someone who is that much older than you. So yeah, I just had some like issues with that. And in the sex scenes, there was something with the sex scenes that just I just really didn't like either. I don't know. There was something very off-putting for me in this book that I just wasn't a fan of it. And it's a shame, because I actually did really enjoy the movie, but the book was not for me. Fortunately, I then read a book that I really, really enjoyed, and I'm not surprised I enjoyed it, because everything about it says this is the book that Aoife will enjoy, and that is Emily Wilde's Encyclopaedia of Faeries. And this is about a character called Emily Wilde, who is kind of a like scholar when it comes to fairy matters. She's living in like our world, it's a normal world, but it's set in the 1900s, I think. And fairies in our world exist, and she is like studying them, and she goes to this it's basically kind of like somewhere very similar to Iceland. She travels there to study this particular type of fairy folk that apparently live in this country, and she goes to live with she kind of lives on the outskirts of the village. She's been looked after by the village, but she is very slightly, I would say she's neurodivergent. She reads a little bit neurodivergent. She's very direct. She's very black and white in her thinking, and she isn't always very good at social cues or really understanding how to socially interact with people. So she kind of rubs up the locals the wrong way, and things are going wrong very quickly. And then things go from bad to worse for her when her colleague Wendell shows up, and he says, "Oh, like I heard you were doing this thing, and I want to tag along because I think this will be really interesting." And he comes and like moves into the house that she's been living in, and then he obviously like charms all of the village, and everyone is like really nice to them again. And she figures out a way like how to use him to like kind of like get what she needs to know from the village so she can like actually do her studies. But Wendell himself has a secret that she thinks she knows, and this kind of comes into play in this book where she, comes a lot closer to figuring out Wendell's secret, and it's probably the key to saving his life at one point in the book as well. And she also figures out that he will be able to help her a lot in her studies, not just from like being friends with the villagers, but being able to figure out like where to go and who to talk to for other matters. But I just really enjoy this. I just thought it was really cozy and sweet. I really loved the romance elements in it as well, and I just really love the fairies. The fairies in this are dark. They're not trustworthy. They're really scary. And yeah, they're my favorite type of fairies. I love them. They're like Holly Black, the Cruel Prince fairies, and those are my perfect type of fairies. I love them, and that's exactly what the fairies were like in this book. So I really, really enjoyed it. This is a really nice one for like I say like autumn time when you're just starting to get a little bit cozy. It's obviously set in Scandinavia, coming into winter, so there's like snow and fire and toastiness and stuff like that. There where you just kind of want to eat like a big bowl of soup and crusty bread and wrap up in a blanket and like have some hot chocolate. Like that's this type of book. And yeah, I really, really enjoyed it, and I'm really looking forward to reading the next book in the series, which is Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherworld. And yeah, seeing where Emily and Wendell go, what their next adventure is, how they help each other out, and how their relationship progresses. I think it'll be really, really fun. So I am really looking forward to it. The next book is one that I actually didn't really enjoy, and I think I might have to bump my rating down. I think I gave like a 3.5 out of 5 stars, and I think it's more of a 3 because when I think about it, I'm just kind of like, ugh, that book. And it's actually a really surprising one because it's one that I've seen people really, really enjoy, and that is The Lost Bookshop by Evie Woods. This is one that like I should enjoy. It's about a magical bookshop in Dublin, a girl finding a second chance, a boy falling in love with her, and yeah, there's so many elements of it that I feel like I should enjoy, but I just, for some reason, I just really didn't. So for this one, we are following a few different characters. We are following Opaline, we are following Martha, and we are following Henry. Martha and Henry are in the same timeline. Opaline is in the 1920s. Yeah, the 1920s, because she talks to James Joyce at some point. So she's like around the 1920s, and first of all, we were following Opaline, who is in this horrible family. She has a horrible kind of abusive brother, and she knows she's basically been like almost like kind of like an arranged marriage with this like guy she does not want to marry, and it's basically to further her family and to help her brother out with like money and stuff. And she's like, well, I'm not going to do that, and she runs away and ends up going to Paris and learns how to become a bookseller in Paris. And she is working in the Paris I think it's Shakespeare and Company, who also like had a relationship with James Joyce and like were publishing his books and stuff. So she is there, and things happen, and eventually she has to move there and go to Dublin, where she finds this bookshop. And this is a very special bookshop. It's kind of a magic bookshop that is there for people who need it, and the people walking past, people who need this bookshop or need specific things, this bookshop will kind of like appear to them and welcome them in. And then almost 100 years later, we are following Martha, who shows up to be a cleaner to this woman who welcomes her in. She's like in the basement, and Martha is also running away from a very abusive husband, and she's trying to like figure out how to start her life again. And she's also like really afraid that her husband is going to find her. And she meets Henry one day, who is actually trying to figure out the location of this magic bookshop. He keeps hearing about this bookshop. He can't seem to find it. He's convinced he saw it once and then it disappeared, and he's never been able to find it again. And the two of them strike up this like friendship slash kind of a romance, and we're basically just following all the characters from that. We're going to the past with Opaline, because obviously she ran this bookshop, and we're trying to figure out what happened to her, where she is now, like, you know, what could, like, all of this. And then we're following Martha and Henry as well, and all of that was fine, except Martha had this there was loads of like really cutesy bits to this that I think were lovely. I do think it dragged on a little bit much. I think it was a little bit slow at parts. Opaline's story I actually didn't really love, and I think it's just Opaline's story had this like element to it that I just really don't enjoy in books anyway, which is, I don't know if it's like, I don't really know if it's a spoiler, but it's basically like, I feel, in my opinion, that so much of a character's life was wasted because of either their own decision or someone else's decision. And it just really upsets me when I see that, because I just keep thinking about like so much time lost and so much time wasted, and so many opportunities lost, relationships, chances, and it just really gets to me, and I just don't like that. And I felt like that in this book with Opaline. And then for Martha and Henry, I did think they were really cute. They were kind of annoying, but they were cute. Martha had this kind of like magic thing where I think it's like she knows what people are thinking or what they're feeling. Um, and then she also gets these like, she basically gets these like quotes in her head that like she dreams or something, that she then like inks onto her back. So she has this like massive tattoo of like these like words that she dreams of, or that she has in her head, and she can't forget them until she can't stop thinking about them until she gets them inked on her body. And there was just no explanation for that. I was like, why is she magic? Like, why is there this magical element of it? I know there's a magical bookshop. That's cute, but the magic for her, I just felt like didn't make sense. It just didn't. I don't think it added anything particular to the story, and I just don't think it needed to be there. So it just kind of bugged me that I was like, I feel like there's no explanation for this. There's no reason for this. Why does she have these like magical abilities? Like, it just doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, I just didn't really like that. So yeah, this is like a 3 out of 5 stars for me. It was just kind of one that, I don't know, it just made me a bit grumpy, and I don't know why. So yeah, another book I've been wanting to read for a really long time, and I've had it on my bookshelf for quite a while, is Oldladyvoice by Elisa Victoria. This is another one that's been translated from Spanish, so this was another one for my 12 translated fiction of the year. And this one we are following a little girl called Marina. She is only 8 or 9 in this, and we're basically following her during a summer. She goes back and forth between her mother and her grandmother. Her mother is quite ill, and she stays a lot with her grandmother when her mother is in the hospital or has like medical appointments and stuff like that. And we are seeing Marina kind of like really worry about what life might look like if her mother obviously gets really sick and dies and leaves her. She might have to go to boarding school, and she's basically thinking about that. And she's also at that point, I think she's like 9 or 10, she's also at that point in her life where she's kind of like turning that adolescence, like where she's not quite a child, but she's not a teenager. She's starting to think about things that are like quite adult, in terms of like sexuality, um, uh, sexuality, sexualization of things, body parts, like body functions. Like, she's kind of starting to really think about all of this a lot, and we're seeing how this like really preoccupies her, and she's kind of in this just like this really complicated age between like wanting childish things, but then not like really like can't wait to grow up and being able to be an adult and do all these things, while also being like a little girl, like at the very heart of herself as well. So this one like was interesting. I think I gave it like a 3 out of 5 stars. There was parts of it that I enjoyed. I did like the kind of the grandmother being like a big character in this and being a really big focus in Marina's life. She does have a really lovely relationship with her mother as well, and she also has a nice relationship with her mother's boyfriend. And yeah, the four of them all kind of like orbiting around each other and having their own kind of relationship with each other and stuff like that, I did enjoy. But Marina herself as a child is like very like, there's so many things that she says or thinks about that you're like, oh god, like I don't know if I want to know about someone thinking about that. Like she has this like really weird obsession with doing a poo. And she has a thing about pooing, and she talks about it quite a lot in terms of like the enjoyment she gets out of relieving herself this way, and like the sound, the feeling, the shape, size of everything that you you know what I'm talking about. And I was just like, I don't really know if I want to read about a little girl taking a shit. Like I just don't think I want to think about it. I don't like, it's not really something that I want to, think about or read. So yeah, there was just that element of it that really threw me off. So yeah, but I do think there's like a particular voice here. There's a particular moment in time that's been captured that is done very well. I do think there are people who would probably get a lot out of this. And yeah, it was interesting. It's just not one that I would reread again. It's not one I technically will keep on my shelves. It's one I will unhaul, give to someone else, and see, pass it back out onto the world. But yeah, I'm glad I read it. It was on my shelf for a while, and I'm glad I finally picked it up and read it. But yeah, one that I'm unsure about. The next book I've talked about a little bit, I think, in my mid-year freakout tag, and that was The Amendments by Niamh Mulvey. It's probably one of my favourite books of the year, thankfully. We are following Nell and we're following Dolores, and Nell is Dolores's daughter. First we were following Dolores when she is kind of a woman in her 20s, and she leaves her kind of like country home to go to Dublin to work for a while. I think she's working for a summer or whatever, and she basically falls into this kind of like feminist movement of a group of women who are trying to bring abortion into Ireland and go for that abortion vote, and kind of bring more body autonomy to Irish women. And it really makes Dolores think about what all of that means, like pregnancy, motherhood, the Irish woman's position in her home and in the country, and the type of rights that she does have, and marriage and all of that. And she's also kind of thinking of like class and education and the importance of all of that, the importance of education, and just doing a little bit maybe more with your life, or even having these ideas, and just being aware of these things. And she comes from quite a religious background. Her mother would be very, very religious, so all of this is kind of spinning in her head as well. She's not necessarily like super pro or anti-abortion. She's kind of like on the fence about it, but she also has this idea of like, of religion, and it's not, what does that mean in terms of a woman's right to choose for herself, and in terms of like religion and the Catholic Church's stance on things as well. So she's kind of thinking all about that. And then years later, we are following her daughter Nell, who is in a relationship with this woman in London. The two of them are living in London, and this woman that Nell is in a relationship with is pregnant via IVF. The two of them are having a baby together, and Nell is having really, really big issues thinking about becoming a mother because of certain things that happened to her when she was a teenager, and she has having this kind of like almost trauma reaction of this idea of motherhood. And again, she is thinking about religion's connection with motherhood. Nell's own experience of getting into this kind of religious group in her area when she was a teenager, and then her own relationship with her mother, how this affected her relationship with her mother, and yeah, just kind of trying to come to terms with a lot of things. And we're just seeing how that they all kind of revolve. We're going back and forth, and I really enjoyed both storylines. I think both of them had really interesting things to say. I think this book had a really interesting point to prove around abortion in general, but around people's personal beliefs and personal feelings about it, and how it's different for every single person, and how it's not, it isn't always this like really black and white, like this is good, this is bad, this kind of thing. But it's also like, it's just so complex for each person, depending on where they're coming from, how they feel, what they believe, what they think, and you just never really know someone's story either. And I think this is a really good book that kind of shows all of that. I think it's just a really interesting look into motherhood, all different types of motherhood, and motherhood, the having children, not having children, losing children. There's, like obviously discussions around abortion in this. There's miscarriage, there is child loss, there's like IVF. So yeah, like motherhood through you know, non-traditional methods as well, in terms of, you know, obviously like two women having children together and different types of family and what that means. And yeah, I just thought this was really, really good, really well written. Niamh Mulvey is a really good author, and I have read her book of short stories before, which were really, really good. This book was really, really good, so I'm really looking forward to whatever she brings out next, because she's definitely like an auto read author for me, I think now. And then unfortunately I'm going to end on a little bit of like a bum note, because I'm going to talk about like my worst book of the year. Actually, I lied in my mid-year freakout tag, because I was talking about a Children of Anguish and Anarchy. I was talking about Children of Anguish and Anarchy by Tommy Adeyemi, and I was saying it was probably one of my worst books. That wasn't my worst book. That was like my most disappointing book of the year so far. This one was 100% my worst book, because genuinely, I can't believe, like, I just thought this was so, so bad. And that is Masters of Death by Olivie Blake. And yeah, this, oh my god, it was so bad. So, so bad. So this is like an urban fantasy book. We are following a bunch of different characters. We are following, it's kind of like narrated in a way by Death. Though you kind of don't really, you kind of get it at the start and a little bit at the end. You kind of forget in the middle that it's actually narrated by Death. It kind of tried to do a the book thief kind of thing, and it just didn't do it. Like, it's not good. And we are following like a human character. We are following a werewolf. We're following a ghost. We're following angels, demons. Yeah, we're following just a bunch of different people. We're following a woman called Viola, who is trying to sell this house, and the house has been haunted by this ghost who was killed, but he has a connection to this house, and Viola seems to be the only person who can see him. So she goes to this guy called Fawcett, who is supposed to be a medium, supposed to be able to see ghosts. He's actually a massive liar, but he is actually the godson of Death, and has been able to cheat Death for quite a while because of this. And he basically uses Death to be able to tell him all the things that ghosts want, and that's how he's able to trick people into thinking that he can actually see ghosts. He can't. His godfather can, because his godfather is Death. And what transpires with all of this is that they end up going into this game that is apparently hosted by Death, where other creatures, supernatural creatures, play this game against Death and bet different things, and basically like Death is able to, like, I don't know whether it's like find secrets or get promises from them and all this kind of stuff. And it's never really explained that well, to be honest, because the entirety of this book is basically them talking and not doing anything. It's just talking, talking, talking. A lot of unnecessary descriptions for things. Very, 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 very flowery writing, to the point where I was like, it's so hard to listen to. I originally started listening to this on audiobook. I think I got less than a chapter in and I switched it off, because I was like, I can't listen to this in audiobook, because the writing was so so overly descriptive and so overly flowery that it was so distracting. I literally couldn't like pay attention to the train that like the author was going on with like all these descriptions. It was so painful to listen to. So I was like, okay, I'll switch to the ebook. I'll see, maybe I'll like that better, because sometimes audiobooks don't work out for whatever reason. So I was like, okay, I'll switch it up. It still didn't work for me. It's still really, really bad. I just felt like it kept building up to this game, that there was like this big thing around this game and something was going to happen, and there were these like star-crossed lovers and this like romance brewing, and like you know, enemies to lovers kind of thing, almost second chance lovers, stuff like that. And it just kept building, and then it got to this game, and again, like, nothing really happened. It was just like, I was like, oh, like, that's it, like, that's all this is. It's like no excitement whatsoever, so much talking for nothing. The writing was just so verbose. It was so distracting. It was so over the top. Really badly needed an editor. Yeah, I think the plot, because as I said, it was so, there was like, it was trying so hard to like turn this game into this big thing, but because it like took so long to get there, and like there were so many different characters coming in, it was just so convoluted that it was just like almost hard to figure out like what the point like of the book was and what the point of the game was. And yeah, it's just like, we were given this relationship that we were supposed to root for, but I don't think there was any substance enough for it. yeah, it was just, there was a few different relationships. There was ones that were quite cute and we could root for. The main one I just like didn't care about. I just didn't care about them at all. I was like, these people have had it like clearly, you know, I don't know, they're just really annoying together. Um and then for me as well, there was like this whole thing like that Death was supposed to be the narrator, and I was like, listen, if you're gonna have Death as a narrator of a book, you need to do it better than the book thief. And in my opinion, no one can do it better than either the book thief or Mort, or like Death in Discworld. Unless you're Discworld Death or Death from the book thief, there's no point having Death as a narrator because it just won't work. It's just not going to be as good. So yeah, that's my opinion. So yeah, I just don't really understand this book. I don't understand why it was published. I think this was published like after the Atlas 6 got really popular, and basically like a lot of the things people said was wrong with the Atlas 6 that I didn't see in the Atlas 6. I can see it in the writing in this book. So yeah, I just don't think it was good, guys. I just don't think it was very good. It was just, yeah, absolute waste of my time. Absolutely worst book of the year. Yeah, super disappointing. So yeah, I'm going to end on that really cheery note. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, what you think, what have been your best, worst books of the year so far. Would love to know. And yeah, I'll chat to you in the comments, and I'll see you guys again next time.